Hello, hello. Welcome to Tech Ascent, the podcast where we dive into the trends, strategies, and success stories that are reshaping the tech landscape as we know it today. I'm your host, Oliver Clingain. I'm also the founder of Ascenxion, the premier business development partner within tech. Today, we're joined by Patrick Frank, the co-founder and COO of Patient Partner. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me here.
It's great to have you on. It's great to meet you. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do with Patient Partner?
Yeah. We started Patient Partner I'd say about like a little around 5 years ago. Got funding in 2020, but prior to that, I was in consumer tech, and before that, corporate, which leaves me with some trauma coming going into the tech focused world. But I was with Compass, which is a prop tech firm now IPO'd, and then during that time. Which was what caused me to leave, is we founded Patient Partner with my co-founder George Cram. Both of us were going through health interventions. Him with his wife, my mother, and he had been in healthcare his entire career. And he kind of came to me and was like, wow, like more people have to be going through what we're going through. Is there something out there that we can find? And we couldn't find anything. And again, he was always my go-to health resource. So when he came to me, I was like, shit. Yeah, I don't know what's out there. I don't like you're the guy. What we basically found is like there's this massive gap in peer-to-peer support across healthcare. And if you, for instance, were to get some spine injury from some activity that you love doing, right? You have no place to go. You listen to the doctor. He's like, hey, you got to go through this life-changing spine surgery, or maybe you need to start a new treatment or prescription because you have diabetes. You're sitting there wondering, what the heck does this mean for my life? We basically give you a person who's very similar to yourself, who has the goals that you have in getting back to health, and they help you through your entire healthcare journey.
Very cool. Very unique as well. And when you guys were kind of coming together, form this business, what did that look like those early days? I know you got funding in 2020. How was the first couple months, I guess, leaving that corporate life?
Yeah, so I made the first leap, and George has a family with kids, and so it took him a little bit longer. But it was very unlike most B2B enterprise SaaS companies, and we definitely some accelerants due to COVID, because that's literally right when we got fundraising, like the month that it was announced as a global pandemic. Typically with enterprise contracting and healthcare, your contracts take 18 to 24 months to close, and that is not an exaggeration. It is insane. And we actually got a very small amount of funding, only around 250K right out of the gate. And within the first 2 months, we landed Medtronic, which is one of the largest medical device manufacturers in the industry. And from there, we were able to raise like an additional 2 million. But it was crazy. I mean, we literally stood up the site and what the basic version of it was on a Wix platform. This was before AI, all the fun stuff. So, I mean, we weren't developers by trade. We just made a simple landing page and ended up leading into a contract with one of the largest manufacturers, which really set us off on our journey.
Awesome. And how did that kind of relationship come to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was total happenstance. I can't say it was like through any unique growth tactic at the time. We were just like trying to formulate the idea and get it out there. She ended up messaging us through the Wix chat. And we saw the contact. We're like, oh my God, this is the head of brand development for Medtronic. Picked up the phone, called her, and a month later we were through MSAs, SOWs, and launching with them. So
Yeah.
it was. I think there was a large stroke of luck that played into that. But obviously you can't rest on luck to be your business development driver. And since then we've definitely refined.
Yeah. Nice, nice. And was this you and George's first company? Was this?
So I have several companies, and we've done several together from our past. We actually built an extremely viral e-commerce product. It was an inflatable pool toy in the shape of a tank that had like a water cannon. As strange as that is in comparison to health tech.
Yeah.
But we had done small little ventures and fun things before. But I think definitely our first dip in the water in terms of B2B enterprise SaaS. I was at Compass in early stages, but that's very different of a model. And I think one of the most interesting things that people don't really realize about B2B enterprise SaaS is specifically in healthcare is it's unlike any other industry. I mean, they move exorbitantly slower than any other industry, and that's largely in part due to regulations, compliance, and you have to go through things that no other industry has to go through. And I think that that's been one of the most fascinating challenges is like you think around overall sales cycle and timeline, most companies have a control over that. Here, you are at the mercy of whatever their compliance teams and review teams are able to, how fast they can move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's definitely a unique challenge, and it's definitely a big switch up from inflatable tanks. So
Yeah, that is the truth. That is the truth.
and just in the tech landscape in general, over the past 5 years since Patient Partner kind of took off, what obviously AI is going to be first one that comes to mind, but what are the kind of major shifts have you seen in the tech landscape or just the general B2B enterprise SaaS landscape?
Yeah, I'd say like as a whole, like I'll do specific to healthcare and then as a whole is specific to healthcare right in like 2020, it was the race to telehealth, right? Like digital enablement in healthcare, and very focused on like at home, like digital telehealth, like that's where everybody was going. And it was really fascinating. We saw a bunch of our peers raise humongous rounds, get overvalued, and several of them are now in the startup graveyard. And we always kept like a very smaller profile, lower, like we didn't want to over raise. We didn't want to like do this whole hype thing. And because we fundamentally believe like businesses should be profitable, right? They shouldn't be flags that get fundraised. And for us, like what we've seen is like, you think about the VC winter that there's been over the past 2 to 4 years. I mean, I'd probably say roughly around 2 years. And, a lot of these companies are either down rounding or going out of business because they over raised, they didn't have a sustained, they hire too fast, fire too slow. And what we've been able to do and what I see a lot of the industry moving towards is like actually providing value first, even in enterprise SaaS. And, AI has done nothing more than just enable a small group of people to do a lot more things. And so, again, there's a ton of regulations and compliance risks with AI in healthcare. So we're moving a little bit slower than other companies. But overall, B2B enterprise SaaS, you see across the board, all private companies, even public companies, downsizing the size of the company, moving faster, and I think doing more with less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and doing more than less is huge, especially being a tech startup. And you mentioned profitability first. Things like hiring fast, firing slow, things like that are challenges other companies see. Do you guys have any kind of strategies in place to keep your growth kind of consistent, obviously without sharing your secret sauce?
Yeah. Secret sauce, I'll touch on that in a second. But what I'd say is like we actually made the mistake alongside our peers in the very beginning. We had a team of 20, oversaturated, payroll. And, what we realized is like we went from being a startup and growing business to a daycare center. And, not to talk badly about anybody who's here, but it's like you end up having to worry about things like HR, management of peoples and schedules and all these things. And what I realized is like, we have to put the focus back on actually growing the core business and we can just do more, right? Less sleep, do more, it's possible. And I think that like what we've basically done is put in place of like, do not hire for anticipated growth, hire to save your sleep schedule. That's like the fun line I kind of like think about where it's like, if I go to less than 5 hours of sleep, then we need to hire somebody. Whether that be a VA or whether that be a full-time, that's how we kind of bucket it. Because at the company right now, I mean, I want to say we're one of the smallest companies in healthcare, B2B, digital health, enterprise SaaS. I mean, there's only 4 of us. And what I work with a ton of entrepreneurs as well in taking their ideas to like, actually a tangible company. And the biggest thing that I have pushed across our entire organization and a mandatory requirement when I go to work with somebody is hire a VA. We have 6. They're incredible. They work harder than any person we've ever hired. And they continue to. And, the entire payroll of our VA team is less than an entry-level employee at any startup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's wise. I'm looking at bringing on a few VAs. Do you hire out of the Southeast Asia? Is that kind of your go-to area?
We've gone across the board. I've had the most success in the Philippines. We have one from Africa, and what I'd say is like there's a ton of services out there that you pay a premium for. Like Athena is probably one of the best I've seen And it's expensive, right? It's $3,000, but you think about, yourself as an individual, and if you're running a business, you go, if I can double my output, if you gave me 40 hours back in my week, is that worth $3,000, right? 160 hours a month, you'll pay $3,000 every day of the week. And they're totally, and I think the biggest issue is most people have a lot of issues with either figuring out what to outsource or the trust of like, oh, they can't do it as good as I can. Like, you're wrong. They can.
And as you were navigating the early days, what were some of the first things you delegated as were you always the COO, or what was kind of
So
the
we're
initial
even like co-founders, but I think like, George is the healthcare background. He speaks the language of the industry, and my like secret sauce, if you will, is like figuring how to do the most with the least amount. And the way I would phrase it is like his job is to make the wheels spin fast. My job is to make sure they don't fall off the body of the car. And what I'd say is like from an operational scaling point, right? Like the more heads you end up adding into the business, the more and you end up inflated in spending and your software line item. And I think keeping that low is also pretty critical.
For sure, for sure. And Patrick, we both use the term secret sauce. I was going to let you plug at the end, but we'll plug it now. Check out the secret sauce newsletter. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's actually something that is really close to my heart because, we had all these other businesses that, we've either sold or whatever, growth has been taking off at Patient Partner. But one thing I wasn't willing to give up was like writing. I've written 2 books soon to be published, but, I was like, hey, like, all these newsletters, it's like a big industry right now. And, for me, it's like, I know that there's a ton of people going through exactly what we went through. And I believe that like, I would have really loved to have somebody just be like, nope, don't spend money on that. Don't do this. Here's the better way to do this. And it's just like, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars of mistakes. And I think saving people from that is like a passion of mine, and like let people create awesome things faster and more efficiently. And that's what it's all about. Just helping people like have an idea and then grow and make something happen.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And out of all the lessons you've learned with those hundreds of thousands of dollars of mistakes, if you could kind of identify the biggest one that you think was the biggest learning moment, what do you think that would be? Well, what you could even look at as what's your favorite thing to write about when you're writing the secret sauce?
I really, at my core, like, and I've even told George, I was like, if we get over 10 employees, like, there's a very good shot I hand in my resume because I will not run a daycare center again. I think it like haunts us just because we lose sight of working on it's like something I say is like, there's a huge difference of working in the business and on the business. And we got so much to this point of like, oh, we're just playing this managerial role instead of inside of it, growing it. And that's like more costly than any agency you might work with, any tool you might be trying to test, because it sucks your time, efforts. Payroll is the most expensive thing always. And I think it's just like that action of like test, iterate, and move fast and get done. Like if something's not working, get it away, right? Move on to the next thing. And so I think that like that's probably cost us the most. Mind you, it took me about 150 grand to figure out the perfect agency, contractor, and tech stack. But I look at it, it's like we're now in a position where it allows us to probably 10x our normal speed.
That's the name of the game. And how do you balance when kind of 10xing your normal speed? How do you balance kind of like we talked about earlier, especially when companies get funding, navigating consistent growth rather than kind of overscaling, underscaling? How do you find that sweet spot?
So I think like it's always like, for us, like I said, we have 4 people who are, one thing that I think is adding a little bit more context to this is like each individual in our company is paired with their own VA. So it's like I believe we hire great people, or like there's a core group that have like a superpower because they have this person helping them with the things that they shouldn't be spending their time and focus on. And so the way I look at it is like, our contracts are hundreds of thousands of dollars and the requirements of those are pretty large. And so we're going through this right now where we have 4 potential closings in Q2. Like that is an area where we go, okay, we know we're going to need to hire one more person to manage this. Like, because these are enterprise level contracts. And what we used to do is go, hey, let's hire now, right? In B2B specifically, we will close the contracts, get started on the onboarding, learn the scopes and the challenges, and then hire. I think a huge benefit to startups right now is that we are no longer in an employees market, or we're an employer, a hirer's market, not a potential hire market. And we can dictate better terms. More people are looking for jobs. Better people are looking for jobs at more reasonable contracts. And one big change that we've been able to do is anybody that comes onto our team, we do contract to hire, non-negotiable, because it's like, hey, it's like dating, right? You think about this: if like you met somebody, you're not going to go get married, on your first date. You date and then you get married. And anybody comes in, it's like being married to a company.
No, I like that. And how do you navigate kind of the hiring process? Is there any tricks in there? I know you've made some mistakes in the past. Anything you look out for? Anything you try to avoid?
Yeah, so I think like specifically to us, they have to have industry expertise. If they don't, they will not understand it. It will take too long to onboard. It will suck bandwidth away from our team. Second is like, you can do job postings to LinkedIn, and God help you if you're doing them to like every single platform, because then you're going to be managing all of the incoming candidates, and you turn into a full-time job. It's like there's a lot of AI systems you can kind of put in place to kind of screen through, I think, figure out the best ones. First interviews should be 15 minutes long, no longer. Like they need to be 15 minutes. You can tell a lot about a person in the first 15. The only person involved in that hiring process should be the person they're going to be reporting to until the very last conversation. And that's just a secondary gut check by the team. But it's like, you don't need to bring someone in, court them to kingdom come. Everybody has to meet them, song and dance, give their opinions. It's like, no, if you're going to be working in this particular division managed by this individual person, they're the one making the decision. They should be empowered to do that.
Yeah, that's smart. And I think that comes down to initially hiring a good person that's going to be able to kind of make those reads.
That's right. So, and the 4 people that are here, I guess four or five, they all went through our like downsizing, and there's a reason that they're still here and operating with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then it just turns into a feedback cycle. They know what you're looking out for. You know what they're looking out for.
I think it's a great thing when it's like, hey, you have someone on your team, and you're like, guess what? Like, I'm about to like almost double your workload, and they're like, all right, here we go. They're not like, oh well, it's like, nope, like this is what it is. Mm-hmm. Like, and those are the people that I think need to stay at companies, because I think everybody right now, if they're most W-2 people, but most like people who are at larger companies or even at startups, like they don't want to work as much. Like everybody's goal is to just like, I'm a remote employee. It's all about convenience, and I really do think that paradigm is massively shifting to people actually having to do hard things again, because everybody needs to show profitability now.
Yeah. Especially, like you said, in kind of the startup space, especially being a funded company, that's got to be kind of the culture you've built has to tie into that. I recently read a book by Patrick Bet-David. I'm not sure if you...
Yeah, of course. I love him.
Yeah. And he was just talking about the differences between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur. And sometimes, as an entrepreneur, how to find intrapreneurs to help you grow your business.
Exactly. So right.
It sounds like it's right on theme with that.
Yep, those are the best people. People who have either started and failed at their own company or want to build something and think of it as their own. Like, those are the people you hire. Mm-hmm. And I think like what's interesting is like there are people who have passions for solving the particular problem that you're trying to solve, and catering questions during the interview process to figure out like, is that something that they want to beat the drum to, or is this just a job, right? Do they just need money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, 100%. And has it just become the culture of Patient Partner, or is there something early days you guys were building out as you and George were kind of putting together the company?
So I'd say like, for us, like you go through pivots a ton, right? Like we are no shame to say we've been through 5, right? To like land where we are right now. And I think like, I consider any major shift in focus a pivot, whereas most people like, oh, our major business model. Like for us, like we opened up the doors to the pharma industry, and that's changed our company drastically. We were specifically only in medical device. We opened up pharma, and that has changed the growth trajectory in a large way. And I think just like on our walls, and sorry for the language here, but like on our walls, like in gigantic print, the biggest value is fuck it, just do it. Like we're doing it. And that's our kind of approach to everything, is like someone comes to us and they're like, hey, can you do this, and this? And we look at them, we're like, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just like you always need to say yes, so as long as it falls within your your lane of capabilities, right? Like if it's just something wildly outside, like then you lose sight of your business focus and you'll spend all this time, money, and effort on one particular client versus like if it's going to add a net benefit to your platform, the answer is yes. And then you just figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Don't overpromise and underdeliver, but always try to go that extra mile to overdeliver. Kind of find that nice little balance.
That's right. It's like even then, like I and this contrarian view maybe here, but like I believe under delivery of any promise is just the ability to have better ideas or work harder, right? Like you don't have to under promise, you just have to work harder and have better ideas to make it work. So it's like, hey, if you make that promise, like do anything you can to knock it out of the park, especially in B2B enterprise, because you get one shot at these contracts and they take forever to close. So it's like you have to. There's no other
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, and as you're building out your company, you've mentioned you've had a few changes, a few big shifts. How do you decide when it's time to either scale, or how do you decide when it's time to pivot?
So I think like in our case, like pharma was like what we looked at was medical device industry moves 10 years. They're 10 years behind pharma, and pharma moves fast in a very slow, fast, very big quotes right there. They move faster than other parts of the industry. And so like that, we were looking at that. We looked at obviously the TAM of the pharma industry is larger than any other industry. And we look at, so it's like, okay, what net benefit does this add to the business? What's the market size of it? How big is the lift if we were to do this? And that's what allows us to shift, right? I think a lot of people, what they'll do is they listen to their customers and they listen to like the voice of the customer. For us, I think that I think that's more applicable in B2C SaaS, right? And from that, it's like you have a lot of people having particular product features or requests. You're picking up the phone, calling all of them to like get insights to your product. For us, it's like we need to see where the industry is shifting. So it's much more macro level, and you want to be first. And so I think that that's how we kind of did it at a market level, market opportunity level, and making sure that if we do this, it doesn't shift the entire focus and core value out of our product, because then we're stuck building something we're making a bet on.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at it. And speaking of bets, Patrick, we can kind of switch lanes here as we start to wrap it up. But speaking of bets, obviously, I'm sure you talk about in the Secret Sauce newsletter, but looking back over your entrepreneurial career, what do you think is kind of the biggest risk you've ever taken, the biggest bet, whether that be on yourself or on kind of a certain movement that's kind of boosted your career?
So like money talks. It's that simple. And it's happened twice with the float company. I funded the whole thing. And during COVID, when that thing started, or right like after it started, your shipping times were forever. All these other things, we had to put up a bunch of capital. Like it was a manufacturer's market, for lack of better words. Like putting it up there, we saw the benefit of it. With Patient Partner going in to raise our seed round, we didn't pay ourselves for 7 months, and I funded the entire company out of my personal bank account. And I'll never forget. And most people, like, here's the thing: most people that have these stories of like, oh, all these crazy funding stories, like Elon's story of like, if SpaceX was going to die the next day and then they got funded. I was like, oh, that's got to be exaggerated. It's not. Like, I was literally sitting on a sidewalk, and I'm ashamed to admit this. I was literally sitting on a sidewalk eating a bag of chips from 7-Eleven and a Slurpee, wondering like, tomorrow could be a very different day. Like tomorrow I could wake up and we're not it. And it came down to literally like I had no more money in the bank account. We weren't racking up debts. We weren't paying ourselves. And then that next day we got funded. The following day, if you guys can remember, the CrowdStrike outage and the entire internet went down the following day or like later that night. So we had to have raised that exact day at that exact time.
Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. And what kind of piece of advice would you give maybe a founder, an entrepreneur at any kind of stage of their journey? What piece of advice would you give them based on that lesson?
I think if you don't use the product, if you wouldn't use the product yourself or you wouldn't put money into it yourself, don't start it. Like that's step one. Step two, and this is the thing I say too, the number one piece of advice I give to everybody: find a VA. Like I should be honestly paid by all these VA companies, because if you are not able to do that, you can never manage a team. You can never be an effective founder, because you haven't learned how to outsource. You haven't learned how to optimize your time. And the last is just like, just roll the sleeves and do it, right? Like whatever it is, just like, it's not as important as whatever it is to get the objective done, right? Like your personal life, all those other things, like sure, but just do the work. It's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. Just get, like you said, roll your sleeves up, get it done.
That's
And
it.
yeah, I know we were talking about our love for Philly before the call started. I'm a basketball fan, so I think one thing that did come out of Philly that was awesome was trust the process, because that's
That's
kind
right.
of their slogan for their basketball team. And I don't know, that's one I take into my business. So
Hey,
sure.
Philly's all about the sports. Like
Yeah.
that is what they got. That is like, I mean, look, Barstool, right? Like perfect example, right? That is
Hmm.
what they live and breathe. San Diego, we have a couple more options. Bryce guy would go surfing or something like that. But
Yeah.
trust the process. You just gotta believe in what you're doing, and if it starts to not work, make it work.
Hmm. Yeah. One foot in front of the other.
That's right.
But Patrick, speaking of putting one foot in front of the other, what's on the horizon for Patient Partner? What's kind of the goals? What's the vision?
So something I'm super excited that we're working on is, and figuring out ways to integrate AI is what we realized from a lot of the innovations that we're seeing from, knowledge bases and avatars and things like that is that you can essentially build out a brain of what I call like, and working on trademark, like the perfect patient. So imagine if you were talking to someone who could literally like a Mystique type X-Men character, shapeshift into like someone very similar to you. They know every single piece of personal journey information across the entire internet, packaged with like all the regulatory compliance, actual prescriptive medication knowledge, all in one brain. And you can talk to them just like I'm talking to you. I think that's like a pretty wild idea, and it is a wild idea when we talk to our customers. But if people aren't, if they aren't aware of the software and the things that are being built in that arena, I think they'll very quickly realize in the next 3 to 5 years, these, chat bots or these like customer helplines or any of these things, they will all not be that anymore. They will be avatars that you can relate to, that will talk to you like a human, that are built with a knowledge base. And I think that that's something where I go, we can launch at mass scale if that's something that we can build out. And I think that might be adoption issues at first, but I think eventually it will be patients and healthcare companies won't have options because that's what they'll be providing.
Hmm. Yeah. And you'd rather be at the forefront of that idea than trying to play catch up. So
That's right.
it's good vision. I love it.
It's awesome.
And yeah, no, Patrick, it's been a fantastic conversation talking everything from entrepreneurial journeys. You're from building water tanks to building B2B enterprise SaaS companies in healthcare. It's a big switch up, but I think that breadth has allowed you to kind of build a successful company today. So
That's it. That's it. I appreciate it, man. Likewise, it was a good
yeah,
combo.
I appreciate you coming on. And for everybody listening, I'll be sure to tag Patrick and all of Patient Partners stuff in the description. But Patrick, is there anything specific you'd like people to go connect with you on?
Yeah, LinkedIn, so all my socials accounts is literally just Patrick Frank. I'm pretty easy to find. And then, yeah, if you guys want to keep up with things, the Secret Sauce newsletter, you can also type in. It's pretty easy to find. Yeah, it only comes out twice a month, so I won't overcrowd an inbox, and hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, sounds good. And like I said, I'll be sure to tag all of that down in the description. But Patrick, once again, thank you for coming on, and for everybody tuning in, thank you for listening.
Awesome. Take care.